Hello, and thanks for joining us today for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Business Podcast. My name is Paul, and today I'm joined by Ken and Ian, and together we're your marketing guides. And today we're joined by Kyle Ruth, who's a real heavyweight in the SEO world and is also the co founder of Internet Marketing Gold. And today we're going to be talking mostly about something called EAT and how important it is to Google when it comes to SEO. Kyle, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get into the podcast episode.
That's good. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, I'm the co-founder of Internet Marketing Gold. That's a platform where we have courses, and I have courses there. And we also run tests on Google's algorithm and publish those test results. I'm also the lead SEO for High Voltage SEO, which is an international SEO agency. Um, we do local to national, international, everything in between. And then I'm also the inventor and co-creator of Page Optimizer Pro, which is an on-page SEO tool.
All right, awesome. So let's get started. So, Kyle, I guess we should start with explaining what exactly is EAT. EEAT.
Yeah, they just added an extra E, so I believe it's
Yeah,
now
that's a
pronounced
recent
E.
development, isn't it?
yeah. yeah, it's expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And the extra E they just added is experience. And the basic idea of it is should your website be in the index in the first place? Is this something that Google wants in the index as just kind of like a base? Like, is this basically reliable? In the recent guidelines that just came out, and this is the quality rater guidelines, and this is where we get this information from, which is publicly available. They've told us that trust is the most important component. It's kind of the centerpiece to it. And basically, the idea with trust is they want to know who's responsible for the website, or who owns the website, and who's responsible for the content. And those are the two main things. And then what you want to do with EAT is to make sure that you tick enough of the boxes so that a bot coming in from Google can understand if your site is trustworthy.
And that's something important that you said, that the Google bot. These aren't real people looking at these websites. It's an algorithm. That's all it is.
That's correct. So we get these from the quality rater guidelines, and those are human. But the important distinction is that they don't impact ranking. They're not doing anything with rank. They're actually just reviewing the results according to a list. And so that's a human going in afterwards and kind of confirming if the results are what Google's hoping to do. But it's the bot that comes in the first place to check things out.
Yeah, so Kyle, when it comes to authority and trust, what do you recommend in terms of content and website structure and all of that, and to be able to help a website establish that authority and trust in the eyes of the Google bot?
The first thing I think you want to think about is demonstrating that you're a real business. You're a real entity, you're a real thing. And so you want to be able to display an address. You would like a local phone number, an about the company page that talks about how long the company's been around or how long this organization has been around, and about the team page that talks about the individuals that exist in this company. Those are kind of some of the sort of basic things, but extremely important things when it comes down to trust. Within that, there's a thing called schema. Schema gets a little technical, but essentially it's tags that go inside the code that help search engines understand what you're talking about. Within that, it's a really good idea to identify what kind of company you are within that schema. So Google can be confident that you're an actual company. That's kind of step one on trust. Another thing would be, is this a real website? And so you want things that are pretty basic, like a current copyright, a privacy policy, terms and conditions, if it's appropriate, like refunds, that sort of thing, complaints, cookie notices, GDPR, ADA compliance, if that's necessary in your area, that sort of stuff. So, kind of like on the one hand, the trust would be demonstrating that you're a real thing, and then the other side of trust would be demonstrating that this is a real website, because people who care about their websites or that are actively maintaining it would do all of those things.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned ADA compliance. Do you have any specific insight into how much of a role that does play We've talked to some folks who sell some ADA compliance related tools, and from their perspective, I mean, first of all, you're talking about an audience, it could be approximately 25% of the population who have some form of disability. So it's just a smart thing to do, for one. But from an SEO perspective, any insights there on how that might help?
Well, it's important if it matters for your audience. That you would fall under something, and generally speaking, it's California and local businesses for that matter. So a business that somebody would actually go to physically are the ones that want to be most concerned about that they're in compliance. And so a lot of these, if something doesn't fall into, if you're in the middle of Asia and there's no ADA compliance, it's probably not anything you really need to worry about. But otherwise, if it's even remotely on your radar, that's something that I would do. And it's not terribly difficult at this point. There are plugins that'll handle that for you, or other type things that's just kind of a plug and go, and you should be okay.
Hey, Kyle. One of the things you talked about in what EAT is, you mentioned that the traditional E was for expertise. What are some effective ways to establish expertise in an industry in the eyes of Google?
Well, so a lot of people get a little confused here because they think like, do I need like a PhD to write my content, or do I need a medical doctor to write my content? And the short answer is no. What you really need to establish is that it's a real person. That there's actually somebody that is writing this thing. And how you can do that is through an author page, an author bio page on your site. So on that page, you can identify who the writer is that's doing this writing for you. And then you can use, and again, in the schema, you can identify them as a person. You can say that this is an actual person. And within that person, you can put links to things that would identify them and what they've done, such as a LinkedIn profile, a link to any certifications they might have, or any organizations that they belong to that would be relevant. From there, once you write an article, when you write that article, you can identify the author and you can link to that page where you've got their information, so that as Google comes in and can see that, okay, this is written by a person, who is this person, you then have a page on your site that identifies who they are. Now, it's important to understand, though, Google's not going to leave the site to figure out if this is a real person or not. They're not going to the LinkedIn profile page. Well, this guy's pretty interesting. He's got really good credentials here. Well, I'm going to read this paper real quick. It's not doing that. You have to give enough signals that you can on your site to demonstrate that it's an actual person. And one other thing I've mentioned too, when people talk about like, do I need that doctor with like 30 years experience or something like that? You don't, because Google's not going to make a value judgment. When you think about it, like what's more important, or what's better, a degree from Stanford or a degree from MIT? That's not the point. The point is that this person might have a degree. And that's one of the little boxes you can tick, but it's not going to make a value judgment that somebody's got, say, 30 years in the industry is doesn't have as much expertise as somebody with a 4-year degree in 1 year, that sort of thing. So it's really just coming down to establishing that this is a person that has written these things, and you need to do as much as you can to demonstrate that they're real.
Awesome. And is there any level of under this expertise category where you're creating a level of understanding about the expertise of the business, or is it really just focused on the individuals?
I think that part of it is the individual. Yeah. Where I think the website would come in would actually be on the next part, the A for authority.
Got it.
Where I think this comes into is, and what the guidelines talk about is that, is this the go-to source for information? That's what they're looking for. And the go-to source for information is going to answer all the questions. So essentially this would be topical authority, which is also a big thing in SEO and digital marketing and inbound marketing right now anyway. But the idea is that, have you covered all the bases? That's what authority does. And so what you want to do is you want to think about what are all the questions that somebody would be asking about this particular thing. And then on that, maybe on that target page or another page on your site, you want to be able to answer those questions and build out your topical authority.
Awesome. Thank you.
So Kyle, following up on that a little bit, we work with smaller businesses and it's a local business. They don't have a huge national presence, but how can a small business owner, or what are some things they can do to establish themselves as a thought leader in their industry?
Maybe you're asking the question, like, how do you like write about boring niches? Like, how does a plumber, or an HVAC like do get that kind of content out. And a lot of that can come down to how-tos. When you're looking at how to like write for a boring industry, it'd be like how to do things, or like the DIY type stuff. You can do a lot of like, here's how you can do it DIY, and explain the expertise that you would need, and then or what you would need to be able to get it done. And that's a good way to get that kind of information on the site, and get a lot of coverage too. Something else that we've done would be like, what does the what would be the do-it-yourself toolkit look like? What are these tools? And then also you can get into what a specialized tools look like. Like, at home you might have access to this, but a professional would actually use this, and describing those types of things. So you can get into a lot of that kind of information to demonstrate coverage of a particular topic, especially if it's a local business or maybe not the sexiest of writing topics.
So would that be a good idea for video content, the how-tos that you talked about?
Yeah, that's a great way to do it, because you could film yourself while, say, you're fixing the sink, or you're doing something with the toilet, or you're doing something with the plumbing outside, and you can show what that looks like, and then just have them record the whole time, have them talk out what they're doing. You can edit that video, and then you can use the transcript for a ton of great content.
Awesome.
That's kind of something that can go viral too. Like that can get outside of just doing this for what you're going to do on the site. You can do, Susie shows you plumbing, and that turns into a whole channel, and she's walking through how you fix all of those certain things and what you would need to do. And a lot of people like watching, you do it on that time lapse type stuff, and people love watching that.
Yeah, and that helps establish authority and expertise.
Yeah, on top of it.
Yeah. So a couple of things related to that, so right now, I don't know if people have really realized this fully or not. I mean, those of us, in the industry, you look at this have seen this for sure, but Google's search results page has changed over the last couple of months. It used to be that it was page driven, to be on, you were on page one, and then you had to click to page two, and now it's, auto scrolling to where you're building, some additional content. And, so it's making it more like a news feed style display, and it's going to be pulling in video. So I think video from an authority perspective, and images as well, which Google dominates and owns, because Google Images and YouTube, also a Google property, it's going to be able to pull those right into the search results. But when you're talking about the authority and the trust, I guess one of the things that comes to my mind is the concept of a skyscraper page, pillar page, hub page, whatever you might call it. Can you talk about the role that those types of page, what those are, first of all, in your mind? And second of all, what role do they really play in helping to build out the authority and trust? I know you talked a little bit about that, but just if you could elaborate.
A lot of people look at those pages as long form content that's going to try to get a lot of information about a particular topic on one page. I personally am not a huge advocate of doing that. I think the right approach would be look at the pages that Google is rewarding. So do the search for the term that you want to win, and look at those pages and see if any of them are skyscraper content. And I would wager there's a good chance that none of them are. And so what I think you want to do, what I think would be a good approach, would be think about the things that could go on to that giant page. Look at what Google is rewarding, create a page like that, and then some of the extra stuff that might be slightly farther afield, that I would turn into supporting content, extra blog posts, for example, and I would link them to that page that I was trying to rank. So that's how I would approach that, where you could get maybe the same amount of information that would be, say, on a skyscraper type page, but giving Google the page that it's expecting size-wise, and then the rest of it going into supporting content on the page, or on the site, excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah. So really more of a content cluster strategy where you're using internal linking, to build out to supporting pages, but don't go crazy thinking you have to write, a 5,000 word post when you can have a right size page if you're using tools like, Page Optimizer Pro or something like that to help you understand, what do you need to have in place, and then linking out to, to the other supporting pieces of content.
That's exactly right. And the other reason I like this technique too is, let's say you've got that target page. Everyone knows, if you've been in SEO for 2 seconds, it takes a while for those pages to rank, especially for those target terms. But if you were to take some of those smaller concepts that are what are often known as long tail keywords, so lower competition, lower search volume type terms, those will rank quickly. And the idea is that once those start to rank, they actually start to get their own authority. And as they rank for more keywords, they start to build their own power and then their own juice, for example. So if you're linking back up to your target page, it does a couple things for you. One is you start to trickle in the right type of traffic. And often those longer tail keywords are more buyer intent keywords. And so things where people might actually convert. And at the same time, you're kind of juicing up your entire site. You're strengthening your entire site so that as they get stronger and you've got links going to that target page, now you're passing more internal link juice to your page. So it's this huge cycle of good that you can put together by not going like so crazy with one thing, but kind of then breaking some of those smaller things off onto pages that'll rank quite quickly with really no SEO. That's the kind of thing where you're putting that term in the URL, the title tag, and the H1. That's probably all you need. And you're just answering that question or providing that information. And it's going to do a lot of good for your site.
Awesome.
And Kyle, what role do customer reviews and testimonials play in a business building authority and trust? Like we've seen it, some big jumps in that over the years. But also, does this affect expertise in the EAT ratio or equation? And is it the same thing as well?
So when you think about reviews, there's some that would go off the site, right? And they might be in the Google listing, for example, or like a Facebook review. I don't think for this conversation for EAT, I don't think that Google will be looking at those. But one thing that they do talk about a lot is UGC, user generated content. And those are often in the form of either questions listed on the page or in the form of some type of review, like this was a great article, thank you, blah, 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 and maybe something like that. I think that's important. Google talks about that, not just in the quality rater guidelines, but also like in the webmaster guidelines and a few other places about how much they like UGC. And so I think a good way to perhaps demonstrate that expertise, to be honest, or even maybe the experience would be through UGC. And I think having comments turned on and responding to the comments, because then you also get feature rich responses. You can respond in a way that highlights your services, highlights your product, gets important terms on the page. That would be a great way to go about it. So I would encourage that. One note is some functions or some plugins for content aren't very readable by Google. Some of them can't be read. So if you're going to do that, you want to make sure that Google can read it so you actually get the credit for it. One extra bonus is that, let's say you're ranking pretty well for a term, you're on page 1 somewhere. If you have comments turned on UGC going, what happens is you slowly but surely drip feed more content onto that page. What you're going to end up doing is you're going to raise the bar to entry. Essentially, it's a way to protect your ranking because somebody won't be able to come in and write a page that large, as things have continued to grow.
Awesome. And just to take that a little bit further, so when we talk about using testimonials and reviews on the website itself, in that context, are we talking about, how sometimes we have sliders that show that, on the homepage? Are we talking review pages? Are we talking specific reviews about specific services that match up on those specific service pages? Maybe can you talk a little bit more about that, Kyle?
That's an excellent question because the one penalty that's pretty easy to get is spammy reviews. And so you must make the review specific to that page. So the thing that's on that page must be what that review is about. So it shouldn't be a general review necessarily. It should be specific to that, whatever is listed on the page. And then that's what you can also mark up again in schema. And schema sucks, by the way. It's not fun. You're going to want to get somebody else to do. I have somebody else do my own stuff, and I don't really even want to think about it. It's worth spending a couple dollars to get somebody just to handle that for you. But once you've got it in place, there are a lot of great benefits to it. And one would be then to mark up reviews that you can get specifically on that page.
Awesome. Thanks.
So this might seem obvious. I mean, honesty and transparency is important in SEO practices, but how would Google even quantify that? How does Google know if an SEO firm is white hat or doing what should be done?
They don't. I mean, that's the bottom line. They don't. So following up on that, then what should, if someone's looking to hire an SEO firm, what should they be looking for or asking them? How do they,
know they're getting a reputable company to do this work for them?
Well, they shouldn't be asking for fake reviews. I mean, that would be a big thing. And then they shouldn't be advocating for fake reviews. I mean, that's just dishonest. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on your ethical level, but I would hope that most people's are higher than that, at least because I mean, this isn't the thing that's taking you to page one. This isn't what's gonna necessarily drive you up. And I think that's actually a very important point about all of EAT. I've had people say like, "Hey, I did all these EAT signals and I'm good, but I didn't see my rankings go up." They're not going to go up. This is actually the kind of thing that protects your site once Google comes in and does a sweep. And it's not an if, it's a when Google will do this. It's usually when your traffic hits a certain amount. And I don't think we've dialed in when that is, but it is kind of like once you've hit a certain point, that's when Google will come in and actually do these checks. And it's actually the worst possible time for most people because their site's taken off. They can see this lovely chart. They feel like they're on top of the world and they're SEO gods. And then the next thing you know, just this tank comes and they're like, how did this happen? I was doing everything right. I did everything white hat. I did everything correctly. But the idea was that once you hit that threshold and Google came in to do the check, these signals weren't there. And most of these signals too, this is a half day's worth of work at worst. So it's kind of like, think about your risk tolerance. If you don't care, then fine, then run with it. But if you do care, then these are the kind of things I would start to work on slowly but surely to get it right. But kind of maybe cycling back to your question, I mean, the transparency is the key, and your level of ethics is also key. And while Google might struggle to identify if, say, a review is real or not, that's the case regardless of where it's posted, whether it's your site or somewhere else. So, I just wouldn't do it.
And are there, just to go off from that a little bit, Kyle, there's been things over the years that did work from an SEO perspective, like keyword stuffing used to be a thing that actually did work. And then Google caught on and then they stopped that. Kind of going away from just reviews and testimonials, but looking at the broader SEO side of things, how can are there indicators that a small business or indicators or questions that a small business should and could ask a potential SEO partner that might help them avoid people that are doing things that, maybe worked a few years ago, they don't work now, and they could actually penalize your site because of that?
I think the first thing you want to ask is, are you going to show me everything you're doing? Are you going to show me everything that you're doing? And the answer should be absolutely yes. There shouldn't be anything that they're not going to show. And if they're going to hide anything, that's a massive red flag, and you don't want to work with them. Now, the second part of your question, though, is like, maybe you don't know if something might be against the guidelines and could potentially be harmful. I think just intuitively, does it pass the ick test? If they say like, all right, we're going to put all this content written in white on your white webpage, and it's like, is that okay? And they're like, sure, that feels icky, right? Like that feels not correct. And so if it doesn't pass the ick test, then it probably doesn't. The other thing too is you can always look up the guidelines, and the guidelines are pretty straightforward. There are a couple of things that are technical, and a lot of people, even SEOs, mess them up as to what they actually mean. But by and large, the stuff that would get you in trouble is obvious. We're going to fire 10,000 links at your website tomorrow. It's like, that seems weird. That seems a little icky. Like, I don't think I want.
You're raising negative signals or negative flags.
Exactly. So I would do that. And then the last thing should be reporting. You should see what a report looks like before you sign on with somebody. You should be getting monthly reporting. There should be some form of accountability where they tell you what they're going to do at the beginning of the month. They should be communicating what they're doing during the month, and at the end of the month, they show you what they did. And if they can't do those three things, then that's probably a real red flag.
Yeah.
So Kyle, most of the businesses that we work with are local, and they serve a local service area, or people from a local area go to that place of business. The whole idea of location pages, service area pages, or service location pages, that seems a little murky to me, but I think there's a lot of power in those, because again, I think if you do them right, they can help to establish the authority and the trust. So can you talk about, what is a location page, or if you refer to it as a service location page? How important are they, and how do you put together a page that's quality? Because historically, this was one of the really spammy things that a lot of people did, is they would write dozens of these pages, and literally the only thing they did was swap out, the location, and everything else was the same. And Google ignores that as duplicate content. But there is a good way and a proper way to do this. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, to what you just said is absolutely correct, that the duplicate content bar is extremely low on local pages. And then generally speaking, changing out the location is enough to get past that bar. So that's absolutely correct. The nice thing about doing the location pages is that it gives you an opportunity to do a GMB for it. So you can actually say this is an actual location. That's a great signal to help you get into the maps at a minimum, if not helping with the organic part as well. As much unique content as you can get on a page is almost always the way to go about it. So, I don't know how fun it would be to talk about, local landmarks and stuff like that, but that would be a way to do it, or maybe what makes a region different compared to others based on using that location or using the service there and stuff like that. So you might have to get creative in terms of the content you're putting on there, but the more unique you can make it, obviously, the better.
Do you think it's more important to have the location driven content as opposed to, because the services, they're going to be the same from one location to the next most of the time. So if you're a plumber, you're going to do, drain line cleanings and stuff like that. So you don't, really the unique and interesting thing to help here, in my mind, is the location information.
Probably true.
Okay. Yeah.
The thing I do like, though, that I found successful is to actually have both types of pages. So drain cleaning, for example, you have a generic drain cleaning page,
Right.
kind of as a top level, but then you also have drain cleaning, Des Moines or whatever. So that you actually have then the location page as well. And what I've found is that can often help with those near me searches. The sites that do that seem to do pretty well with kind of that generic search that isn't necessarily location driven, but the person is in that location. So I do kind of like to grab both. And if somebody has ideas of grandeur that they might go outside of that location, that's also helpful when they try to expand either into another location or another state or even national.
Okay. Do you, what's the importance in terms of linking to those pages internally, and from a navigational perspective, any insights on what you recommend there?
I do like to have a page. I'm not sure what you might call it, but some sort of hub or resources page that would list all the locations. So it's kind of a page that does list out, and then the idea is that will link in then to all those location pages. Same with all the services, for example, a page that would have all the services and then link in. What you can do is you can actually send signals to that page. You could build links to that page, make it obviously not just the links and you're driving to, make it link worthy, but then that can spread out juice to all those pages that are, say, all your different locations that you're doing. And the nice thing about that too is it also helps with indexing. The number one way Google likes to find a page is through a link. And so if you have links on your site going to all those deeper places in your site, it can be very, very helpful to get Google to get in there and then regularly get there as well.
Yeah. Okay. What about updating the content on those pages on a regular basis? Is that beneficial as well?
Yeah, and kind of changing that modified date so that you do a little update is going to be. And one other option on that would be the UGC as well. That would get hopefully slowly but surely some information on there. People like, hey, what are your hours at this location, or are you near this, or hey, these guys are great. That kind of stuff. That little bit is enough to kind of keep things going.
All right, cool.
And Kyle, how does Google, do we even know the answer to this, but how does Google determine the level of expertise, authority, expertise, authority, and trust of a business or a website? And what are some best practices for building EEAT that businesses can adopt today? I mean, we've talked a bit about that, but can you encapsulate that for us?
So as I said before, I don't think there's a value judgment. I don't think they're really going to say this one actually has more experience than that one, and that because it's not going to, because these aren't ranking factors. This is get past the threshold factor, so it's kind of like can we identify this enough and that we feel good? Okay, fine. Then after that, then it's on the consumer to make that decision. That Google won't be making that decision during this process. Get those nuts and bolts. Like if you really struggle with something, get that address on there, get the local phone number on there, get that company page, the team page, and email addresses. And if I could throw in one more, would be the author page. Like those would be real mission critical. And then think about your own business, what you would need. Do you need a complaints page? Do you need a refunds page? Do you need a privacy policy page? That kind of thing. And if you do, then those should be there as well. And it always kills me how many people don't have a current copyright. I get it maybe into like like February, maybe January, February. But once you hit March, that's gotta be just a trust signal for somebody coming to your site too, right? They look at this site and they're like, copyright 2017. Like that can't be a good trust signal that you're sending to a potential customer, right? So probably a lot of it just comes down to just be real, just be normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the phone number. When you were talking about a local phone number, if we use call tracking, right? And we, usually when we do that for our clients, it's on everything. So it's a substitutive number on the website. So you have a pool of numbers so you can track where the attribution of that source is coming from. And we do it on their Google business profile so that Google understands that this is a number that we use for I was going to say GMB. That's a throwback, but have you seen any negative aspects to using call tracking? I don't know if you can comment on that, but it occurred to me.
No, because within the schema, you can give whatever the regular number is. So you can identify that number in the schema, and that's totally fine if you're using call tracking to change things around. That's no problem at all.
Perfect.
Some people talk about we don't have a phone, or that's nothing that we want. The guidelines actually do talk about just getting one of those call forwarding things and just give a message that gives information on where they should go. Hey, we don't take calls, so you can email us at that. And those things cost like $5 a month.
Yeah.
So as we've been talking about eating as kind of an aside, there's also something called your money or your life. Does Google weight that differently based on industry? Like if you're in the financial industry, Google puts more emphasis on it than if you're a roofer. How does Google do that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. So the YMYL is how things kicked off. That was the initial medic update where it looked like all of these medical sites got popped and kind of started the scrutiny. But then it's trickled down to everybody. But I think your point is entirely correct that plumbers will have a different set and maybe even a lower set than, say, supplements, or fat loss pills, that kind of thing, because those can harm you a lot more than, somebody not fixing your pipes correctly. Like obviously that's not, but it's kind of like the idea is that you probably won't die if your toilet doesn't get fixed properly. There's that balance. And so there are also probably lists of things too, where these sites go under higher levels of scrutiny. So you need to tick more boxes versus, say, the local business that needs to tick certain ones, but not quite as many. That's probably very valid.
So kind of following on that, with the Google Guarantee program or Google Local Services ads, when they started that, they really were, I think they were signaling that there were certain industries that they just didn't feel were particularly trustworthy. And so they have businesses go through a pretty rigorous process to say, yeah, we've got business insurance, you have to monitor and respond to reviews in a very timely manner. Any correlation with the set of businesses that Google has selected for local service ads as it relates to the scrutiny that Google might have when it comes to the EEAT?
I haven't seen it. I wouldn't know what the scale might be. It makes perfect sense to me that there would be, but what that is, I really couldn't tell you.
Okay. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about Page Optimizer Pro and what it is and what it does. And we'll make sure that we have a link, for folks in the show notes to go check out that tool. So if you just spend a couple of minutes, I'd love to hear what that does.
Oh, thanks. Very simply, it's we're trying to give edge analysis for your on-page so you can beat your competitors. The idea is that you put in the page that you are trying to win a primary term on, an important term to you. And then the idea is that we pull in the competitors and then we do edge analysis. So we're not doing averages or giving kind of some general advice to every website. We're looking at your particular SERP, what's going on there. And then there are times when you want to do something more than your competitors, times you want to do the same amount as your competitors, and times you want to do less. And then on very specific terms, such as your primary keyword, variations of that keyword, usually like close synonyms, or contextual terms. And so we give you those terms that you want to put in and the places you want to put them and how many times you should get them on the page.
Interesting. Cool.
We also get into a lot of other things too. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Like we get into NLP, so we have our own NLP library. We also have access to Google's NLP library. We also have an EAT tool, and I think we're the only on-page tool that does that, where we look at the EAT factors that we can find on your page and the EAT factors we find on your competitor pages, so that you can go in and say, okay, you know what, all our competitors seem to have this, this, and this, and we don't. That's usually very low-hanging fruit, and then you kind of get those on there, so you have a little more peace of mind that you are probably within the right range of what Google's looking for your particular keywords.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've heard Moz, I think it was Moz, coined the term minimum viable SEO. And so some of what you're talking about, in terms of EAT is just literally, don't, just do the simple basic blocking and tackling stuff, and don't give Google a reason to say, these people don't care about their website. I mean, this is the stuff that, if you're not doing this, you really don't have an opportunity to win at SEO, right?
That's right. And a lot of people that do complain about this, they're like, well, it's just a website. It's not a business. I'm like, well, if you're taking money, that's a business, and you should probably be registered somewhere. And a lot of people don't realize that. Or some people, and I get the argument or the complaint anyway, that, to do all this stuff is going to cost me $50 a month. And having this, that, or the other, and I'm only making $10 a month. And I understand that situation. But ultimately, though, if you're trying to get to the point that this is, a money-making endeavor, that these are the things you need to do and the things you need to be able to display on your site.
Yeah. We've got a question here, too, from one of our viewers. So I'm going to put that on the screen. So, Kyle, I don't know if you can see that, but if you can talk to that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I get asked this a lot, and I have not seen anything that would indicate that was going to help at all. Just linking out to an authority site, I don't know what signal that would send, because you could be the least authoritative thing of all time, and just because you're linking out to .gov isn't going to provide any signal. I also don't think that Google is going to be going anywhere outside of your site to do this type of evaluation. It's going to be looking for the signals inside your site, and so to even identify if that's a real authority, if that's the kind of place that makes any kind of connection. I don't think that's going to help anything with EAT.
All right, thanks.
So, Kyle, is there anything you want to add? Anything we maybe missed? I mean, this isn't a huge topic. It can be like a complicated technical topic, like when you get into structured data, but anything you'd like to add that we didn't talk about?
No, I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head with just do the things. You're a real site. You're a real thing. Make sure that a bot can see that. When the first Medic update happened, and there was a site by Dr. Axe that got hit, and it was one of the things I was looking at the site, and as a human, I could look at this site and like, this is a great site. It looks great. This information looks very authoritative. Dr. Axe is a beautiful man. Like, that's all. But what does a bot see as it comes in? It sees a picture, it sees text. And what I realized is it took 2 clicks off the site to find out who owned the site. And the contact form was just that generic contact form that says, put your name, email address, and then the little box. And, when you click enter, that goes nowhere, right? There's no way to contact anybody. So if somebody were to follow the advice on this site and say they get injured, who do they talk to about that? Or if they don't know how to use the product that's being recommended, who can they contact for help? If they get the wrong product, who can they get back to on any of this? And then that's when I realized, like, oh, I can see why Google hates this site, because even though as a human I can see it's real, a bot can't see that it's real. So you need to make things as obvious as you can for a bot to say, like, we're a real place, we're a real business, we're a real entity, we're a real organization. And then as much as you can demonstrate is the key.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you look at privacy policy, terms of service, things like that, one of the things they want to see is who do you contact if you have an issue with a product or service? Who do you contact? Is there a phone
Exactly
number
right.
you can call? Is it, is there an email address?
Exactly right.
Yeah. In terms of, I mean, a lot of the things that we've talked about pertain to things that you do, on a specific page. But part of SEO is ongoing, continuing to create good, interesting, relevant, authoritative, trusted content. Any insights into content rhythms that people need to think about? How many times should they be posting new content, new pages, new blog posts, location pages, whatever it might be, to send the right signals to Google?
I haven't seen a minimum number, like
Okay.
this is the threshold. I know that we experimented a lot with say posting once a day versus posting every other day. So like 30 pieces of content versus 15 pieces of content. And between the two, we really didn't see much difference in terms of like how much Google was crawling inside, how fast these pages were indexing and all that. I've also played with, say, dropping all 15 on one day on the first of the month, or spacing them out every other day or whatever. And I also didn't see too much difference there. So I don't know if like the frequency is the idea or the necessarily the amount, but that it is happening. That you actually do have something that you're probably putting out once a week or so, or a couple times a week. And then the thing that I would look for is these don't have to be huge pieces of art. This isn't, you're not putting some masterpiece together. I would go through the people also ask. There's a fun little free tool called SEO Minion. It'll scrape like 20 levels deep on people also ask. That's going to give you about 500 to 750 people also ask. I'm sure there are a few good ones in there, and they're the kind of things that is just a few paragraphs. That's 300 to 500 words, something like that. They can be
Yeah.
pounded out pretty quickly. And if worse comes to, I mean, not even worse comes worse, because I love those terms. A lot of them are zero search volume, so your competitors aren't going to waste their time. But there's no such thing as a zero volume term if it's showing up and the people also ask, because somebody had to ask it, and more than one person. So
Yeah.
there's probably actually a few decent clicks to be had there. And as we talked about earlier, this is the kind of thing where that page will start to rank quickly. And it'll start to rank for not just that term, but some related terms as well. And you're going to start juicing up your whole site. So I would have a content schedule in place. I would do maybe at least once a week as a minimum. But they can be these people also ask type questions that are just really great for your site. They're really great for your visitors. You're providing good information. And I just think you can't go wrong doing that.
Yeah, cool. What are your thoughts about AI and AI writing?
I have a lot of thoughts. SEO's dead. That's it. We just pack it up. No. AI content, there are two concerns that people have. One is that all kinds of content are going to be just produced in mass. And that's going to kill the web. And the other concern that people have is that maybe like a chat GTP type 1 SERP response or one answer in the SERP is going to happen. And it's going to kind of kill what we're doing. But neither of those things are going to be a reality, because on the one hand, with the mass content, Google's already dealt with this. I don't know. I think you guys have been in the game for a while. I'm sure you remember mass page builders were going to be the end of SEO, because you could create all these sites, 10,000 pages at once with all this content. That's a direct corollary. That didn't kill SEO. Mass Web 2.0s with syndication, like FCS Networker, if you ever played with that, and that's going to kill SEO. And that was then en masse, all that syndicated content going out, and mass was going to take down SEO, and that didn't happen. Mass duplicate content type stuff, that didn't take down SEO. So those kind of things are very similar to what is the issues that people have, or the concerns they have with AI doing content creation. And ultimately, I think it'll go by how duplicate content works. If you ask ChatGPT the same question, you start to see the same answer after you've asked it about on the fourth, fifth, or sixth time. So really, that's just going to be kind of the same information. So if you're just taking that as it is and putting it on, after a while, everyone's going to have the same information. All that content's going to be devalued as duplicate content. So the way to get past that would be human editing. And that's what things come down to anyway. You can use something to get an outline or a list or kind of get things started. And the more human editing you do, the better. But that's the whole point, because then you're adding to the conversation. Once you have tweaked it enough and added that voice to it that is with your brand, or your perspective or how you're approaching something, then you have actually added to the conversation, and then you're going to be just fine with that. The other issue that people have is in one answer SERPs. And if you've seen, it was the most glorious example. I've been talking about this, like they're wrong. Because ChatGPT is not a search engine. It's a language model. And it's actually doing a probabilistic guess as to the words associated with your question. So it isn't going through and searching for an answer. It's giving you its best guess as to the words that are associated with that answer. And so that means it could be very wrong. And then I asked it, I was trying to find, ChatGPT says that it goes to 2021 in current events. And I tried to find where that was by doing large sporting events. And I asked it who won the Kentucky Derby in 2021. And it gave a very confident and very wrong answer. And it was just the wrong information. It gave the information about the Belmont Stakes. But it was just that one response. And then the people will be like, well, you could just Google search it to check. Well, if I have to Google search it to check, what's the point? Why not just do a Google search?
Exactly.
And then it could not have been better when Google throws up their thing and it has the wrong information in it. That was solid gold to me. Because think about the thousands of eyeballs that saw that. And who knows what telescope looked at what thing? I have no idea.
Right.
The who knows is the scientist that did it. The guy was like, hey, that was my telescope, not that telescope. But the thing was that like nobody knows that information, especially when you don't see what the source is. And because they're not actually searching and sourcing, that it's best guess words, they can't provide the source. So you don't know if like, was it influenced by NASA.gov? Clearly no. Or was it influenced by Joe Loves Science and Falafel.com? And, he was just putting that in, and there was more influenced by that, but because there isn't a source, you can't see how valid that information is. The one other thing they showed, which was solid gold, was what's easier to learn, the piano or the guitar? They literally gave the answer as maybe. It depends. Like it was like some people say the guitar and some people the piano. I was like, that is a worthless response. And then also,
which is probably a true answer, though, right?
Right. Yeah. But the thing too is like there wasn't any information. Like, are they getting this from pianosforever.com or guitar?
Right.
What's influencing this? Where I could actually go and then read the actual opinion or the perspective. I'm just getting an actual maybe answer, and I could have come up with that answer on my own. So I'm not worried about SERPs at all. What looks exciting would be that enhanced search. The kind of the Bing looks like they're going for, which if you played with something like an extension like Keywords Everywhere or SERP Works or something like that, and kind of gives you that extra information that's specific to what you want to see, that looks pretty good to me. That seems to me that's a ranking opportunity, because then we're going to see like how can we influence it to get into that area. And if Bing can pull any market share from Google, that's also great for us, because that's just traffic from different sources. And if you're in the SEO services game, that's more things to optimize for. So in the end, I think this is just going to be opportunities. I don't think we have anything to worry about. And I think we'll soldier on and we'll be great for the next several years.
Yeah.
The whole other side of it that's not really it's being discussed in kind of the marketing world, but not so much in the public sector, is just the monetization, right? That these businesses, yes, Bing is all about market share because they own so little of it that they can come across as being the good-hearted neighbor that's trying to give you the right information. But all of these platforms are sustained by monetization to some degree, and how that's going to interlink with AI. And if they go to one single SERP answer, how does that work?
Well, if it comes down to that, they're stealing your information for it and not giving you any credit, like people will just opt out. That's what will happen. And then that's where something like the EU comes in and we'll sue the pants off of them for our privacy, which is fantastic. Right. Complain as you will, but that's going to do a lot of heavy lifting for business in the US. So if that's what they come down to, they decide we're just going to do this one answer. We're not going to do any source attribution, and we're just basically going to steal your stuff. You will be able to opt out. And if they don't, what's going to happen there is then people are going to stop going, because then they won't have relevant current information, and that will destroy their whole advertising model. Yep. One other thing on advertising, though, is that these things are extremely energy they require inefficient. They require a ton of energy, much more energy than a search does. And so when it comes, and that's obviously a pollution thing, but I don't think they care. at all about pollution, but they do care about cost, and energy is expensive. And so they will always do it in the way that is the cheapest, that brings the most ROI. So if they find that they're really not getting any extra benefit out of this type of AI technology, and people are just happy with the SERPs as they are, and when they look at the cost, then they'll shelve it, or they'll find some other way to do it, or to do like an approximate of it that isn't actually the same type of thing. So the cost of it, I'm interested in, because they will have to monetize that more so than they're monetizing, I think, the SERPs now. And I think that's probably a pretty scary proposition for them.
Yep.
Fun conversation. Thanks, Kyle.
Energy intensive was the.
There we
That's
go.
right.
Why couldn't that come out of my mouth in the moment?
Yeah. Awesome. Kyle, do you want to talk a little bit about Internet Marketing Gold as well?
Oh, sure. That's our community. So I have some courses in there. One's on page SEO. I'm an on-page SEO expert, in case that slipped by. But I've got a whole course on page SEO, and then I've got a whole course on white hat SEO. And the white hat SEO course I really like a lot, because it gives a framework for how you can do effective SEO that will be evergreen and won't get you in any kind of trouble. I've got a course on how to do SEO tests, and then in there are 40 other courses as well from other instructors that kind of cover a lot of different aspects of SEO, from content creation to link building to entities, to domain buying, to how to maximize your exit, how to flip a site, that kind of stuff. So we kind of get into a lot of different things on there. And then, as I mentioned, there are also tests. We do quarterly test reviews where we do like 10 to 15 to 20 tests and kind of show them. The tests are fun, but they're often like more interesting than anything. What we found is that people like them, and I think it does give us kind of like a base level of credibility, like, hey, we actually are in here and we're doing these things. But then at the end of the day, people want to learn. They want to be able to apply things, and that's where the courses come in. So you kind of like build a framework out of the courses that you're taking, and then as you see test results, you can find a place to plug it in or kind of tweak something that you're doing. But that's where I think we kind of get an edge on other things, where we actually have the framework through the courses, and then also the real-time learning with the tests.
Yeah, cool, awesome.
Kyle, real quick, we're coming up on an hour here, but going back to your point about content based on people ask, would you link to those pages internally, and what are your thoughts on orphan pages as they relate to SEO?
Yeah, you want to avoid orphan pages when possible, mainly because it's hard for Google to get there. That's kind of the biggest issue. But what I like to do is I like to do them in manageable amounts of, say, 3 to 5, maybe up to 7. That depends on your spreadsheet skills. But I try to keep them in that. And then what I'll do, like, let's say an example of 3, you've got A, B, and C. I'll link A to B, B to A and C to B. And then all 3 of those, I'll link up to one target page and one target page only, because I'm building these to support one particular target page. And so what I'll do is I'll create that. It's a virtual silo. Those links will be in the body. And I don't really care about links in the menu or the sidebar or the footer. These are links that are within the text of it. I'll link in that way, and I'll link very specifically, and those are the only links I'm going to do. But what that does is, as I mentioned, as they start to rank for things and as they build up their own strength, they pass juice to each other, and all of them pass juice up to your target page. And this will reduce your dependency and need for external backlinks, because you're going to be taking advantage of the strength that you're building, which is a completely white hat technique, and you're going to pass more and more juice. And then if, let's say, those things take off on their own and somebody starts sharing them and they start accumulating links on their own, even better, where then now you're juicing up that whole silo and juicing up your target page. I think on one of your podcasts, you guys mentioned, one of you says that the only thing you control is your own site, and that's 100% correct. Yeah. You have complete control over what you put on your site. And this is one of the things that not only can you control it, but you can get a lot of benefit out of it. And it'll reduce your dependency on external backlinks, which will make you less susceptible to Google updates. When you're keeping that stuff all on your site, when you're dialing in your on page, you're doing the keyword research to get these long tail terms, you're linking them properly together, you are less susceptible to any kind of Google update, because what you've done in there is all within the guidelines.
Yeah, and John Mueller, I don't know if it was an AMA, but John Mueller even said that in the future he can see where external backlinks are going to be less of a ranking factor.
Yeah, it's an easy one to see. The problem is they're really baked into how the algorithm works. And for them to take them out, it would be a a huge shift. And so I'm not sure how much they could devalue them in the near term without finding a suitable replacement. My argument has always been, they've got Google Chrome. They can see where people are clicking. I think they could actually add value to links by clicks that are actually received. Not just because what they do is they do an approximation. How likely is this link to be clicked? And if it's on if it's on ESPN.com versus JoeSports.com, the ESPN.com is more likely to be clicked. A link that's at the top of the page is more likely to be clicked. Those kind of things potentially pass more juice and then would be kind of factored into how strong this particular link is. Well, I think you could just create a baseline for it all and then actually track how many clicks actually go through it. And then you can see if it's actually a legitimate link or not and start scoring things that way. But I don't work for Google yet. And I've sent them a couple postcards with these ideas on them, but I don't think anybody's getting them.
Well, so we're coming up on an hour. There's probably a good place to wrap up. But Ken's asked you a couple questions here, but how can people find out more about you and what you do? And
the easiest place is just to go to kyleroof.com. I've got all my projects on there and the stuff that I'm working on. So that's an easy one, kyleroof.com. I hope it's up to date. I have a VA that's supposed to be on top of that, but I don't know how many times I've gone on there and just been like, oh my God, I can't. the copyright won't be current. I'm like, I can't go on and tell people to get their copyrights current when my own copyright isn't current. You're killing me.
Yeah.
Well, you can pull that in dynamically. There's ways to do that. But yeah, I guess this is a good place to wrap up. Kyle, thanks for joining us and sharing your thoughts on this topic. It's very insightful. And thanks to our audience for joining us. Hopefully you found this information valuable. And if so, please share it with other businesses who could benefit from it. And Ian, you want to take us out?
Sure. Until next week, folks, keep calm and mark it on.